have mentioned our personal experiences and influences. So can you all talk about how those experiences and influences have changed your thinking in your professional and personal lives around equity, and how they motivated you to be the voices of change and advocacy for equity work? Long-winded first question, I'm sorry.
Do you want me to start?
Wow.
So this is kind of, I mean, I think in my introduction I talked a lot about like my professional experience. So this one is really about my personal experience, and I'll tell you my personal experience in K-12 and college as well, now that I think about it, was almost always being the only Indigenous person in the room. I literally had another Native girl in my class in 6th grade, and that was the only time. And so, you know, it's a very different experience of constantly being the other and having to explain yourself and to represent an entire group of people. And, you know, it's a pretty awkward situation in social studies class when you're, you know, a kid and everyone turns and looks at you. Anyone in the room know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So, you know, it was kind of like, you know, I think a lot of kids who have that experience kind of fold into themselves and try to like become invisible, right? And I was fortunate to be raised by parents who said to us, you know, there's all different kinds of ways to be Indian and you don't have to prove anything to anyone. And so like that experience, just being really grounded in who I am and my identity and my background and my history has enabled me as an adult then to take that and feel a sense of mission to enable to have young people know, and not just Indigenous young people, but all kids, to help them find their own sense of identity and not to force things upon them, but also that it's okay to be your whole self at school. And that's what you should be, and that there's all different ways of knowing and there's different ways of being. So that's been really like the center of a lot of my work in the last 25 years of my career, has been around how can I advocate for all young people to get to know themselves and not be defined by other people's expectations.
Thank you. So for me, when I grew up in Burnsville, there was not a lot of alternative views on gender, and within my own family, we had some people that tended to show transgender traits. However, that was not an accepted part of our family. And so when my youngest began to show some traits that would lead us to believe that this may be who they truly are, I wanted to be the one that accepted. I feel like that this is a matter of life and death, because children that are supported, they are so much more likely to have successful lives and continue their life and not have it end tragically in suicide. So for me, it comes from my heart to accept my child, and it was never a question. And in fact, a couple days ago, my child was asking if they were out of the closet. I said, you were never in it. We've always known. We may not have the right words. So they just changed their pronouns recently. So Heron was born male and transitioned to using she, her, hers pronouns when they were 3.5 or 4. And because to a 3.5 or 4-year-old, pronouns don't matter. Because what matters is who has your ball and if they're going to give it back to you. I mean, that's truly all that matters. And so now that Heron's grown, we've been able to use better words to describe who they are. And so I make pronoun mistakes frequently, and I'll likely make it today. And so what I've learned is to open my heart and assume that everyone has good intentions. And so when I called the principal of my child's elementary school in Edina and let them know that Heron was going to be starting kindergarten, I didn't have an ask because I didn't know what to ask for. And the principal, Katie Mahoney, immediately said, okay, does Heron need a bathroom? And it hadn't even occurred to me that Heron would need a bathroom because I wasn't thinking like that. I was just thinking, like, I just want to have an open ear. And so my child started kindergarten with an all-gender bathroom, just because I asked, or not because I asked, but because she offered. And that was, it wasn't an ask that I had to promote a change. It was just presenting the fact, and our school accepted Heron. And so I've gone to the city and the state to try to promote all gender restrooms, because we have had some incidents at some northern Minnesota state parks. And that's where I've begun to really see how important it is to, the bathroom issue is so important to have that safe space, because within the bathroom you're incredibly vulnerable. And you don't need to have hateful language towards you. And so that's how I've begun my advocacy work.
I think for me, growing up in the school districts here, I never really saw a lot of representation for like the LGBT community. I never really saw that in elementary school and middle school. I was bullied pretty badly in elementary school and middle school because I did not fit that social norm where you had to be specifically this or that. And it was fairly difficult for me, and I reached high school and I found a group of friends that made it so much easier. I found a GSA with a teacher who is accepting, is wonderful, and really kind. And I think having that support system really made it easier for me to come out of my shell, and made it easier for me to start talking about it and trying to make a difference in the school system. I am pretty active in the GSA. I'm fairly active when it comes to the walkouts that our school has. It was something that I felt really strongly about, because I don't want other kids going through the school system without that representation. I don't want them to feel like they have anybody to talk to. I don't want them to feel like they aren't welcome. And I think that was really the most important thing for me, was so that other kids didn't have to go through that and they don't have to feel alone.
I can absolutely resonate with everything that all of you have said thus far, from schools being both a refuge or site for answering questions that maybe you didn't even know you had, to also schools being a place of intense loneliness and isolation, and sites of risk. So I think a lot about safety in very broad terms. So safety in terms of like your bodily integrity, right? But also safety to learn, safety to explore, right? Safety to be wrong and fail is a big thing in certainly on my campus and in my classrooms. I started going to school at around age 3, and I haven't stopped. I don't really plan on stopping. Academia seemed like a good idea when I got the chance to try it. And so far it's still seeming like a good idea, although things can change, as my industry is pretty, it's a rough place to be for a lot of reasons, for a lot of people. When I think about safety and I think about my career journey, I feel very thankful to be at the institution that I'm at now. So MCAD, as my school is known, it is enjoying right now a great gender diversity on campus, and we have, I think, one of the highest percentages of gender diversity, certainly in the city, maybe in the state, and probably also in the region. Our student body is self-identified, meaning each student identifies him or themselves. about a third of the students identify as trans or gender non-binary, which is a very high percentage for college campuses. We have about 750 students, give or take, undergraduates. So a third of those students self-identify as something other than cisgender, which to me is very important. So I am a gender non-binary person. I didn't always have that language. I'm 47, so that growing up, that language didn't exist. I've always been queer. That language also didn't always exist. I've always been black. That language did exist. When I was growing up, it's still around. And so when I think about what it means to be a college student, what it means to be on a college campus, safety for me is a huge concern. Because if you don't feel safe, you can't learn, right? And if you don't feel safe, you can't effectively participate in campus culture, which is not just about learning, it's also about being and civics. And in the Twin Cities, I will say being on a college campus is also, whether you want it to be or not, it's very much an exercise in social justice or social injustice, and those things often happen at the same time in the Twin Cities and in the state of Minnesota, certainly. So I think a lot about how to advocate doesn't even, that verb doesn't even really come into it, because I'm working, right? So I think of what does it mean to be, in my case, a person who teaches gender studies, as I do? What does it mean to be a person who teaches critical race theory, which I do? What does it mean to be a feminist pedagogue, which I am, right? So those things are, those I would say, occupations are, for me, not so much about advocacy, but about doing the work. And it has been a great benefit for me to work with a student population who they all opt in to my classes, right? So I don't force anyone to be there, and I actually offer the opportunity for students to leave my classroom if they don't like it. But so far, most students don't leave, which is a really great thing. And I realized that in K-12, like, those options are harder to come by, perhaps, especially when you're dealing not with just the student herself or himself or themselves, but also parents and families and communities, right? So I feel very fortunate to work in a community that sees both social justice as a mission and social injustice happens on my campus every day, as it does on all campuses in our area, probably on your campuses too if you work on one. So both being like in the midst of all of that and remembering who I am and being part of a community that is doing the language work to describe and articulate our circumstances is to me both very exciting and something that I've also always done. So now I just get paid a little bit to do what I do. Most of it goes back to my student loans, but I feel like it's a trade-off that so far has been very worth it to me. As a board director for P-Fund, I also get to talk with students who don't, not just students, but I really enjoy talking with students who aren't on my campus. So I talk to leaders across all age groups in the 5-state region, and I'm usually very excited because our concerns, whether you're in education or not, around social justice and avoiding social injustice as much as we can, are so similar. So I see my work as an educator as absolutely in line with my personal values. I live my life wholly every day. I'm an academic activist, which also seems to me like it's very redundant to say that, because it seems like if you are an academic, you must be an activist, otherwise why would you do this work, right? Or how are you doing this work, I guess, is an important question for me. So the ways in which all of these areas of my life are just this tight little nugget of goodness, or a little glitter ball, are just so necessary. So I actually really appreciate opportunities like this to sort of maybe slow down and articulate how the work is being done and what the needs are. The question of bathrooms on college campuses, students have been hacking bathrooms for a very long time. Now, hopefully, they get to do it much more safely. But at schools, these sort of underground practices that are now becoming institutionalized, there are some great things coming out of that, and then there are also, you know, interesting challenges for institutions. And I'm really glad that institutions are taking up the mantles, especially school principals, are taking up the mantle of saying, how can we make this better for your kid? To me, that's super exciting work. So.